Okay, very good. All right. Monday Book Club. Today is December 8th, 2025, and we are beginning our reading of Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. And without any more ado, I will begin reading. Chapter 1. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself, for Lucy had her work cut out for her. The doors would be taken off their hinges. Rumpelmayer's men were coming, and then thought Clarissa Dalloway, what a morning! Fresh, as if issued to children on a beach. What a lark! What a plunge! For it had always seemed to her when, with the little squeak of the hinges, which she could hear now, she had burst open the French windows and plunged at Borton into the open air. How fresh, how calm. Stiller than this, of course. The air was in the early morning, like the flap of a wave, the kiss of a wave, chill and sharp. And yet, for a girl of 18, as she was then, solemn, feeling as she did, standing there at the open window, that something awful was about to happen, looking at the flowers, at the trees with the smoke winding off them and the rooks rising, falling, standing and looking until Peter Walsh said, musing among the vegetables, was that it? I prefer men to cauliflowers. Was that it? He must have said it at breakfast one morning when she was gone out onto the terrace. Peter Walsh. He would be back from India one of these days, June or July, she forgot, which for his letters were awfully dull. And it was his sayings one remembered, his eyes, his pocket knife, his smile, his grumpiness. And when millions of things had utterly vanished, how strange it was. A few sayings like this about cabbages. Next.
She stiffened a little on the curb, waiting for Dartnell's van to pass. A charming woman, Scrope Purvis thought her, knowing her as one does know people who live next door to one in Westminster, a touch of the bird about her, of the jay, blue-green, light, vivacious, though she was over 50 and grown very white since her illness. There she perched, never seeing him, waiting to cross, very upright, very upright, for having lived in Westminster, how many years now? Over 20. One feels, even in the midst of the traffic or waking at night, Clarissa was positive, a particular hush or solemnity, an indescribable pause, a suspense, but that might be her heart, affected, they say, by influenza before Big Ben strikes. There, out it boomed. First a warning musical, then the hour irrevocable. The leaden circles dissolved into the air. Such fools we are, she thought, crossing Victoria Street, for heaven only knows why one loves it so, how one sees it so, making it up, building it round one, tumbling it, creating it every moment afresh. But the veriest frumps, the most dejected of miseries, sitting on the doorsteps, drink their downfall, do the same, can't be dealt with, she felt positive, by acts of Parliament. For that very reason they love life. In people's eyes, in the swing, tramp, and trudge, in the bellow and the uproar, the carriages, motor cars, omnibuses, bands, sandwich men shuffling and swinging, brass bands, barrel organs, in the triumph and jingle, and the strange high singing of some aeroplane overhead, and what she loved, life, London, this moment of June. Next, please.
For it was the middle of June. The war was over, except for someone like Mrs. Foxcroft at the embassy last night, eating her heart out because that nice boy was killed. And now the old manor house must go to a cousin, for Lady Bexborough, who opened the bazaar, they said, with a telegram in her hand. John, her favourite, killed, but it was over. Thank heaven, over. It was June. The king and queen were at the palace, and everywhere, though it was still so early, there was a beating, a stirring of galloping ponies, tapping of cricket bats, lords, Ascot, Ranelagh, and all the rest of it, wrapped in the soft mesh of the grey-blue morning air, which, as the day wore on, would unwind them and set down on their lawns and pitches the bouncing ponies whose forefeet just struck the ground and up they sprung, the whirling young men and laughing girls in their transparent muslins, who even now, after dancing all night, were taking their absurd woolly dogs for a run. And even now, at this hour, discreet old dowagers were shooting out in their motor cars on errands of mystery. And the shopkeepers were fidgeting in the windows with their paste and diamonds, their lovely old sea green brooches in 18th century settings to tempt her. One was my biting actually for Elizabeth, loving it as she did with an absurd and faithful passion, being part, since her people were courtiers once in the time of George. He too was going that very night to kindle and illuminate, to give her party. But how strange, on entering the park, the silence, the mist, the hum, the slow swimming happy ducks, the pouched birds waddling, and coming along, he's back against the government buildings, most appropriately carrying a dispatch box stamped with the royal arms. Who but Hugh Whitbread, our old friend Hugh, the admirable Hugh, and
Okay. Good morning to you, Clarissa, said Hugh, rather extravagantly, for they had known each other as children. Where are you off to? I love walking in London, said Mrs. Dalloway. Really, it's better than walking in the country. They had just come up, unfortunately, to see doctors. Others people came to see pictures, go to the opera, take their daughters out. The Whitbreads came to see doctors. Times without number, Clarissa had visited Evelyn Whitbread in a nursing home. Was Evelyn ill again? Evelyn was a good deal out of sorts, said Hugh, intimating by a kind of pout or swell of his very well-covered, manly, extreme handsome, perfectly upholstered body. He was almost too well dressed always, but presumably had to be with his little job at court, that his wife had some eternal ailment, nothing serious, which, as an old friend, Clarissa Dalloway would quite understand without requiring him to specify. Ah, yes, she did, of course. What a nuisance, and felt very sisterly and oddly conscious at the same time of her hat. Not the right hat for the early morning, was that it? For you always made her feel as he bustled on, raising his hat rather extravagantly and assuring her that she might be a girl of 18. And of course he was coming to our party tonight. Evelyn absolutely insisted. Only a little late he might be after the party at the palace, to which he had to take one of Jim's boys, and always felt a little skimpy beside you, schoolgirlish, but attached to him, partly for having known him always. But she did think him a good sort in his own way, though Richard was nearly driven mad by him. And as for Peter Walsh, she had never to this day forgiven her for liking him. Now, next, please.
She could remember scene after scene at Burton. Peter furious, Hugh not, of course, his match in any way, but still not a positive imbecile, as Peter made out. Not a mere barber's block. When his old mother wanted him to give up shooting or to take her to Bath, he did it, without a word. He was really unselfish. And as for saying, as Peter did, that he had no heart, no brain, nothing but the manners and breeding of an English gentleman, it was only her dear Peter at his worst. And he could be intolerable, he could be impossible, but adorable to walk with on a morning like this. June had drawn out every leaf on the trees. The mothers of Pimlico gave suck to their young. Messages were passing from the Fleet to the Admiralty. Arlington Street and Piccadilly seemed to chafe the very air in the park, lift its leaves hotly, brilliantly, on waves of that divine vitality which Clarissa loved. To dance, to ride, she had adored all that. For they may be parted for hundreds of years, she and Peter. She never wrote a letter, and his were dry sticks. But suddenly it would come over her. If he were with me now, what would he say? Some day some sights bring him back to her calmly, without the old bitterness, which perhaps was the reward of having cared for people. They came back in the middle of St. James's Park on a fine morning. Indeed, they did. But Peter, however beautiful the day might be, and the trees and the grass, and the little girl in pink, Peter never saw a thing of all that. He would put on his spectacles if she told him to. He would look. It was the state of the world that interested him. Wagner, Pope's poetry, people's characters eternally, and the defects of her own soul. How he scolded her. How they argued. She would marry a prime minister and stand at the top of a staircase. The perfect hostess, he called her. She had cried over it in her bedroom. She had the makings of the perfect hostess, he said. Tom.
Though she would still find herself arguing in St. James's Park, still making out that she had been right, and she had to, not to marry him. For in marriage, a little license, a little independence, there must be between people living together day in, day out, in the same house, which Richard gave her, and she him. Where was he this morning, for instance? Some committee, she never asked what. But with Peter, everything had to be shared, everything gone into, and it was intolerable. And when it came to this scene in the little garden by the fountain, she had to break with him, or they would have been destroyed, both of them ruined. She was convinced, though she had borne about her with her for years, like an arrow sticking in her heart, the grief, the anguish. And then the horror of the moment, when someone told her at a concert that he had married a woman met on the boat going to India. Never should she forget all that. Cold, heartless, a prude, he called her. Never could she understand how he cared. But these Indian women did, presumably. Silly, pretty, flimsy, nincompoops. And she wasted her pity, for he was quite happy, he assured her, perfectly happy, though he'd never done a thing that they talked of. His whole life had been a failure. It made her angry still. She'd reached the park gate. She stood for a moment looking at the omnibuses in Piccadilly. She would not say of anyone in the world now that they were this or were that. She felt very young, at the same time unspeakably aged. She sliced like a knife through everything, at the same time was outside, looking on. She had a perpetual sense, as she watched the taxicabs, of being out, far out to sea and alone. She always had the feeling that it was very, very dangerous to live even one day. Not that she thought herself clever or much out of the ordinary. How she had got through life on a few twigs of knowledge Fraulein Daniels gave them, she could not think. She knew nothing, no language, no history. She scarcely read a book now except memoirs in bed, and yet to her it was absolutely absorbing. All this, the cabs passing, and she would not say of Peter, she would not say of herself, I am this, I am that. Anna?
Her only gift was knowing people almost by instinct, she thought, walking on. If you put her in a room with someone, up went her back like a cat's, or she purred. Devonshire House, Bath House, the house with the china cockatoo. She had seen them all lit up once and remembered Sylvia, Fred, Sally, Seaton, such hosts of people, and dancing all night, and wagons plodding past to market and driving home across the park. She remembered once throwing a shilling into the Serpentine, but everyone remembered what she loved was this here, now in front of her, the fat lady in the cab. Did it matter then, she asked herself, walking towards Bond Street, did it matter that she must inevitably cease completely? All this must go on without her. Did she resent it? Or did it not become consoling to believe that death ended absolutely, but that somehow in the streets of London, on the ebb and flow of things, here, there, she survived, Peter survived, lived in each other, she being part, she was positive, of the trees at home, of the house there, ugly, rambling, all to bits and pieces as it was, part of people she had never met, being laid out like a mist between the people she knew best, who lifted her on their branches as she had seen the trees lift the mist, but had spread ever so far, her life, herself. But what was she dreaming as she looked into Hatchard's shop window? What was she trying to recover? What image of white dawn in the country as she read in the book spread open? Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages. This late age of the world's experience had bred in them all men and women, a well of tears. Tears and sorrows, courage and endurance, a perfectly upright and stoical bearing. Think, for example, of the woman she admired most, Lady Bexborough, opening the bazaar. Next.
There were Johnson Jollities. There were Sophie Sponge, Mrs. Asquith's memoirs, and big game shooting in Nigeria all spread open. Ever so many books there were, but none that seemed exactly right to take to Evelyn Whitbread in her nursing home. Nothing that would serve to amuse her and make that indescribably dried up little woman look, as Clarissa came in, just for a moment cordial, before they settled down for the usual interminable talk of women's ailments. How much she wanted it, that people should look pleased as she came in, Clarissa thought, and turned and walked back towards Bond Street, annoyed, because it was silly to have other reasons for doing things. Much rather, she would have been one of those people like Richard, who did things for themselves, whereas she thought, waiting to cross, half the time she did things not for themselves, but to make people think this or that. Perfect idiocy, she knew, and now the policeman held up his hand, for no one was ever for a second taken in. Oh, if she could have had her life over again, she thought, stepping onto the pavement, she could have looked even differently. Joe.
She would have been, in the first place, dark, like Lady Bexborough, with a skin of crumpled leather and beautiful eyes. She would have been, like Lady Bexborough, slow and stately, rather large, interested in politics like a man, with a country house, very dignified, very sincere. Instead of which, she had a narrow pea-stick figure, a ridiculous little face, beaked like a bird's. That she held herself well was true, and had nice hands and feet, and dressed well, considering that she spent little. But often now, this body she wore, she stopped to look at a Dutch picture. This body, with all its capacities, seemed nothing at all. She had the oddest sense of being herself invisible, unseen, unknown. There being no more marrying, no more having of children now, but only this astonishing and rather solemn progress with the rest of them up Bond Street, this being Mrs. Dalloway, not even Clarissa any more, this being Mrs. Richard Dalloway. Bond Street fascinated her. Bond Street early in the morning, in the season, its flags flying, its shops, no splash, no glitter. One roll of tweed in the shop where her father had bought his suits for 50 years. A few pearls, salmon on an ice block. Joan.
That is all she said, looking at the fishmongers. That's all, she repeated, pausing for a moment at the window of a glove shop where, before the war, you could buy almost perfect gloves. And her old Uncle William, who used to say a lady is known by her shoes and her gloves. She had turned on his bed one morning in the middle of the war. He had said, I have had enough. Gloves and shoes she had, a passion for gloves. But her own daughter, her Elizabeth, cared not a straw for either of them. Not a straw, she thought, going up Bond Street to a shop where they kept flowers for her when she gave up. Elizabeth really cared for her dog most of all. The whole house this morning smelled of tar. Still better, poor Grizzle, than Miss Kilman, better distemper and tar and all the rest of it than sitting mute in a stuffy bedroom with a prayer book. Better anything, she was inclined to say, but it might be only a phase, as Richard said, such as girls go through. It might be falling in love. But why Miss Kilman, who had been badly treated, of course? One must make allowances for that, and Richard said she was very able, had a really historical mind. Anyhow, they were inseparable, and Elizabeth and her own daughter went to communion, and how she dressed, how she treated people who came to lunch, she did not care a bit. It being her experience that the religious ecstasy made people callous. So did causes. Dulled their feelings, for Miss Kilman would do anything for the Russians, starved herself for the Austrians, but in private inflicted positive torture. So insensitive was she, dressed in a green Mackintosh coat. Year in and year out, she wore that coat. She perspired. She was never in the room 5 minutes with making you feel her superiority, your inferiority. How poor she was, how rich you were, how she lived in a slum without a cushion or a bed or a rug or whatever it might be. All her soul rested with that grievance sticking in it, dismissing from school during the war. Poor, embittered, unfortunate creature. For it was not her one hated, but the idea of her, which undoubtedly had gathered into itself a great deal that was not. I got it.
No. All right. I guess we go on to Des.
Okay, well, I just lost that there now.
Good luck with whatever the emergency alarm is, John.
Yeah. I'll start here. Year in, year out, she wore that coat. She perspired. She was never in the room 5 minutes without making you feel her superiority, your inferiority. How poor she was, how rich you were. How she lived in a slum without a cushion or a bed or a rug or whatever it might be. All her soul rusted with that grievance sticking in it, or dismissal from school during the war. Poor, embittered, unfortunate creature. For it was not her one hated, but the idea of her, which undoubtedly had gathered into itself a great deal that was not Miss Kilman, had become one of those spectres with which one battles in the night, one of those spectres who stand astride us and suck up half our lifeblood, dominators and tyrants, for no doubt with another throw of the dice, had the black been uppermost and not white, she would have loved Miss Kilman, but not in this world, no. It rasped her, though, to have staring about her in her this brutal monster, to hear twigs cracked and feel hooves planted down in the depths of that leaf-encumbered forest, the soul, never to be never to content quite, to be content quite, or quite secure, for at any moment the brute would be stirring. This hatred, which, especially since her illness, had power to make her feel scraped, hurt in her spine, gave her physical pain, and made all pleasure in beauty, in friendship, in well-being, in being loved, and making her home delightful rock, quiver, and bend, as if indeed there were a monster grubbing at the roots, as if the whole panoply of content were nothing but self-love and hatred. Duncan, please.
Nonsense! Nonsense! She cried to herself, pushing through the swing doors of Mulberry's the florist. She advanced, light, tall, very upright, to be greeted at once by button-faced Mrs. Pym, whose hands were always bright red, as if they had been stood in cold water with the flowers. There were flowers, delphiniums, sweet peas, bunches of lilac and carnation, masses of carnations. There were roses, there were irises. Ah, yes. So she breathed in the earthy garden sweet smell as she stood talking to Mrs. Pym, who owed her help and thought her kind. For kind she had been years ago, very kind, but she looked older this year, turning her head from side to side among the irises and roses and nodding tufts of lilac with her eyes half closed, snuffling in. After the street uproar, the delicious scent, the exquisite coolness. And then, opening her eyes, how fresh, like frilled linen clean from a laundry laid in wicker baskets, the roses looked. And the dark and prim, the red carnations, holding their heads up, and all the sweet peas spreading in their bowls, tinged violet, snow white, pale, as if it were the evening, and girls in muslin frocks came out to pick sweet peas and roses after a superb summer's day. With its almost blue-black sky, its delphiniums, its carnations, its arum lilies, was over. And it was the moment between 6 and 7 where every flower, roses, carnations, irises, lilac, glows. White, violet, red, deep orange. Every flower seems to burn by itself, softly, purely in the misty beds. And how she loved the gray-white moss spinning in and out over the cherry pie, over the evening primroses. Next.
And as she began to go with Miss Pym from jar to jar, choosing nonsense, nonsense, she said to herself more and more gently, as if this beauty, this scent, this color, and Miss Pym liking her, trusting her, were a wave which she let flow over her and surmount that hatred, that monster surmounted all, and it lifted her up and up when, oh, a pistol shot in the street outside. Dear those motor cars, said Miss Pym, going to the window to look, and coming back and smiling apologetically with her hands full of sweet peas, as if those motor cars, those tires of motor cars, were all her fault. The violent explosion which made Mrs. Dalloway jump and Miss Pym go to the window and apologize came from a motor car which had drawn to the side of the pavement, precisely opposite Mulberry's shop window. Passers-by who, of course, stopped and stared had just time to see a face of the very greatest importance against the dove-gray upholstery before a male hand drew the blind, and there was nothing to be seen except a square of dove-gray. Next, please.
Yes, rumours were at once in circulation from the middle of Bond Street to Oxford Street on one side, to Atkinson's scent shop on the other, passing invisibly, inaudibly like a cloud, swift, veil-like upon hills, falling indeed with something of a cloud's sudden sobriety and stillness upon faces which a second before had been utterly disorderly. But now mystery had brushed them with her wing. They had heard the voice of authority. The spirit of religion was abroad, with her eyes bandaged tight and her lips gaping wide. But nobody knew whose face had been seen. Was it the Prince of Wales's, the Queen's, the Prime Minister's? Whose face was it? Nobody knew. Edgar J. Watkins, with his roll of lead piping round his arm, said audibly, humorously of course, "The Prime Minister's car." Septimus Warren Smith, who found himself unable to pass, heard him. Septimus Warren Smith, aged about 30, pale-faced, beak-nosed, wearing brown shoes and a shabby overcoat, with hazel eyes which had that look of apprehension in them which makes complete strangers apprehensive too. The world had raised its whip. Where will it descend? Everything had come to a standstill. The throb of the motor engine sounded like a pulse, irregularly drumming through an entire body. The sun became extraordinarily hot because the motor car had stopped outside Mulberry's shop window. Old ladies on the tops of omnibuses spread their black parasols. Here a green, here a red parasol opened with a little pop. Mrs. Dalloway, coming to the window with her arms full of sweet peas, looked out with her little pink face, pursed inquiry. Everyone looked at the motor car. Septimus looked. Boys on bicycles sprang off. Traffic accumulated, and there the motor car stood with drawn blinds, and upon them a curious patter like a tree, Septimus thought, and this gradual drawing together of everything to one centre before his eyes, as if some horror had come almost to the surface and was about to burst into flames, terrified him. The world wavered and quivered and threatened to burst into flames. It is I who am blocking the way, he thought. Was he not being looked at and pointed at? Was he not waited there, rooted to the pavement for a purpose? But for what purpose?
Let us go on, Septimus, said his wife, a little woman with large eyes and a shallow, pointed face, an Italian girl. But Lucrezia herself could not help looking at the motor car and the tree pattern on the blinds. Was it the Queen in there, the Queen going shopping? The chauffeur who had been opening something, turning something, shutting something, got on to the box. Go on, said Lucrezia. But her husband, for they had been married 4 or 5 years now, jump-started and said, all right, angrily, as if she had interrupted him. People must notice, people must see. People, she thought, looking at the crowd staring at the motor car, the English people with their children and their horses and their clothes, which she admired in a way. But they were people now, because Septimus had said, I will kill myself. An awful thing to say. Suppose they had heard him. She looked at the crowd. Help, help, she wanted to cry out to butchers, boys and women. Help. Only last autumn, she and Septimus had stood on the embankment, wrapped in the same cloak, and Septimus reading a paper instead of talking. She had snatched it from him and laughed in the old man's face who saw them. But failure one conceals. She must take him away into some park. Orla?
Now we will cross, she said. He had it right to his arm, though it was without feeling. He would give her, who was so simple, so impulsive, only 24, without friends in England, who had left Italy for his sake, a piece of bone. The motor car, with its blinds drawn and an air of inscrutable reserve, proceeded towards Piccadilly, still gazed at, still ruffling the faces on both sides of the street with the same dark breath of veneration, whether for Queen, Prince, or Prime Minister, nobody knew. The face itself had been seen only once by 3 people for a few seconds. Even the sex was now in dispute, but there could be no doubt that greatness was seated within. Greatness was passing, hidden, down Bond Street, removed only by a hand's breadth from ordinary people who might now, for the first and last time, be within speaking distance of the majesty of England, of the enduring symbol of the state, which will be known to curious antiquaries sifting the ruins of time, when London is a great grass-grown path, and all those hurrying along the pavement this Wednesday morning are but bones, with a few wedding rings mixed up in their dust, and the gold stoppings of innumerable decayed teeth. The face in the motor car will then be known. Tom.
It is probably the Queen, thought Mrs. Dalloway, coming out of Mulberry's with her flowers. The Queen. and for a second she wore a look of extreme dignity, standing by the flower shop in the sunlight while the car passed at the foot's pace with its blinds drawn. The Queen going to some hospital, the Queen opening some bazaar, thought Clarissa. The crush was terrific for the time of day. Lords, Ascot, Hurlingham. What was it, she wondered, for the street was blocked. The British middle classes sitting sideways on the tops of omnibuses with parcels and umbrellas. Yes, even furs on a day like this. Where, she thought, more ridiculous, more unlike anything there's ever been that one could conceive. And the Queen herself held up, the Queen herself unable to pass. Clarissa was suspended on one side of Brook Street, Sir John Buckhurst, the old judge, on the other, with the car between them. Sir John had laid down the law for years and liked a well-dressed woman. When the chauffeur, leaning ever so slightly, said or showed something to the policeman, who saluted and raised his arm and jerked his head and moved the omnibus to the side, and the car passed through. Slowly and very silently, it took its way. Clarissa guessed. Clarissa knew, of course. She had seen something white, magical, circular, in the footman's hand, a disc inscribed with a name, the Queen's, the Prince of Wales, the Prime Minister's, which, by force of its own lustre, burnt its way through. Clarissa saw the car diminishing, disappearing, to blaze among the candelabras, glittering stars, breast stiff with oak leaves. Hugh Whitbread and all his colleagues, the gentlemen of England, that night in Buckingham Palace. And Clarissa, too, gave a party. She stiffened a little, so she would stand at the top of her stairs. Anna?
The car had gone, but it had left a slight ripple which flowed through glove shops and hat shops and tailor shops on both sides of Bond Street. For 30 seconds, all heads were inclined the same way, to the window. Choosing a pair of gloves, should they be to the elbow or above it, lemon or pale gray? Lady stopped. When the sentence was finished, something had happened. Something so trifling in single instances that no mathematical instrument, though capable of transmitting shocks in China, could register the vibration. Yet in its fullness, rather formidable, and in its common appeal, emotional. For in all the hat shops and tailor shops, the strangers looked at each other and thought of the dead, of the flag, of empire. In a public house in a back street, a colonial insulted the House of Windsor, which led towards broken beer glasses and general shindy, which echoed strangely across the way in the ears of girls buying white underlinen and threaded with pure white ribbon for their weddings, for the surface agitation of the passing car as it sunk grazed something very profound. Next.
Gilding across Piccadilly, the car turned down St. James Street. Tall men of robust physique, well-dressed men with their tailcoats and their white slips and their hair raked back, who for reasons difficult to discriminate were standing in the bow window of whites with their hands behind the tails of their coats, looking out, perceived instinctively that greatness was passing, and the pale light of the immortal presence fell upon them as it had fallen upon Clarissa Dalloway. At once they stood even straighter and removed their hands, and seemed ready to attend their sovereign, if need be, to the cannon's mouth, as their ancestors had done before them. The white bus and the little tables in the background, covered with copies of the Tatler and bottles of soda water, seemed to approve, seemed to indicate the flowing corn and manor houses of England, and to return to the frail hum of the motor wheels as the walls of a whispering gallery return a single voice, expanded and made sonorous by the might of a whole cathedral. Shawled Moll Pratt, with her flowers on the pavement, wished the dear boy well. It was the Prince of Wales for certain, and would have tossed the price of a pot of beer, a bunch of roses, into St. James Street out of sheer lightheartedness and contempt of poverty, had she not seen the constable's eye upon her, discouraging an old Irish woman's loyalty. The sentries at St. James saluted. Queen Alexandra's policemen approved. Joel?
A small crowd, meanwhile, had gathered at the gates of Buckingham Palace, listlessly yet confidently. Poor people, all of them, they waited. Looked at the palace itself with a flag flying. At Victoria, billowing on her mound. Admired her shelves of running water, her geraniums, singled out from the motor cars in the mall, first this one, then that, bestowed emotion vainly upon commoners out for a drive. Recalled their tribute to keep it unspent while this car passed and that, and all the time let rumour accumulate in their veins and thrill the nerves in their thighs at the thought of royalty looking at them, the Queen bowing, the Prince saluting, at the thought of the heavenly life divinely bestowed upon kings, of the equerries and deep courtesies of the Queen's old doll's house, of Princess Mary married to an Englishman, and the Prince, who took wonderfully, they said, after old King Edward, but was ever so much slimmer. The Prince lived at St. James's, but he might come along in the morning to visit his mother. John?
So Sarah Bletchley sat with her baby in her arms, tipping her foot up and down as though she were by her own fender in Pimlico, but keeping her eyes on the mall, while Emily Coates ranged over the palace windows and thought of the housemaids, the innumerable housemaids, the bedrooms, the innumerable bedrooms, joined by an elderly gentleman with an Aberdeen terrier, by men without occupation. The crowd increased. Little Mr. Bowley, who had rooms in the Albany and was sealed with wax over the deeper sources of life, but could be unsealed suddenly, inappropriately, sentimentally, by this sort of thing. Poor women waiting to see the Queen go past. Poor women, nice little children, orphans, widows, the war, tut-tut, actually had tears in his eyes. A breeze flaunting over so warmly down the mall, through the thin trees, past the bronze heroes, lifted some flag flying in the British breast of Mr. Bowley as he raised his hat and as his car turned into the mall, and held it high as the car approached, and let the poor mothers of Pimlico press close to him, and stood very upright. The car came on. Suddenly, Mrs. Coates looked up into the sky. The sound of an airplane bored ominously into the ears of the crowd. There it was, coming over the trees, letting out white smoke from behind, which curled and twisted, actually writing something, making letters in the sky. Everyone looked up. Next, please.
Dropping dead, down, the airplane soared straight up, curved in a loop, raced, sank, rose, and whatever it did, wherever it went, out fluttered behind it a thick, ruffled bar of white smoke, which curled and wreathed upon the sky in letters. But what letters? A, C, was it? An E, then an L? Only for a moment did it lie still. Then they moved and melted and were rubbed out up in the sky. And the airplane shot excuse me. The airplane shot further away, and again, in a fresh space of sky, began writing a K, an E, a Y perhaps. Glaxo, said Mrs. Coates in a strained, awe-stricken voice, gazing straight up, and her baby, lying stiff and white in her arms, gazed straight up. Primo, murmured Mrs. Bletchley, like a sleepwalker. With his hat held out perfectly still in his hand, Mr. Bowley gazed straight up. All down the mall, people were standing and looking up into the sky. As they looked, the whole world became perfectly silent, and a flight of gulls crossed the sky, first one gull leading, then another, and in this extraordinary silence and peace, in this pallor, in this purity, bells struck 11 times, the sound fading up where there among the gulls. The airplane turned and raced, swooped exactly where it liked, swiftly, freely, like a skater. That's a knee, said Mrs. Bletchley, or a dancer. It's toffee, murmured Mr. Bowley. Next, please, Duncan.
Well, how much further is this chapter? Can anybody tell me?
I don't think there's chapters. I was just
No.
looking.
There's a page break about 6 or 8 pages ahead.
Okay, well, we'll go up to that page break then.
Yeah,
and
it's
stop
4
at that
pages.
point.
Hmm.
Okay. It's toffee, murmured Mr. Bowley, and the car went in at the gates, and nobody looking at it. And shutting off the smoke, away and away it rushed, and the smoke faded and assembled itself round the broad white shapes of the clouds. It had gone. It was behind the clouds. There was no sound. The clouds, to which the letters E, G, or L had attached themselves, moved freely, as if destined to cross from west to east, on a mission of greatest importance which would never be revealed. And yet, certainly so it was, a mission of greatest importance. Then suddenly, as a train comes out of a tunnel, the aeroplane rushed out of the clouds again, the sound boring into the ears of the people, of all people in the mall, in Green Park in Piccadilly, in Regent Street, in Regent's Park, and the bar of smoke curved behind, and it dropped down, and it soared up, and wrote one letter after another. But what word was it writing? Lucretia Warren Smith, sitting by her husband's side on the seat in Regent's Park in the broad walk, looked up. Look, look, Sestimus, she cried, for Dr. Holmes had told her to make her husband, who had nothing whatsoever seriously the matter with him, but was a little out of sorts, take an interest in things outside of him. So, thought Septimus, looking up, they are signaling to me, not in actually words. That is, he could not read the language yet, but it was plain enough. This beauty, this exquisite beauty, and tears filled his eyes, and he looked at the smoke words languishing and melting in the sky, and bestowing upon him in their inexhaustible charity and laughing goodness, one shape after another of an unimaginable beauty, and signaling their intention to provide him for nothing, forever, for looking merely with beauty, more beauty. Tears ran down his cheeks. Next.
It was toffee. They were advertising toffee, a nursemaid told Retzia. Together they began to spell T-O-F-K-R, said the nursemaid, and Septimus heard her say K-R close to his ear, deeply, softly, like a mellow organ, but with a roughness in her voice like a grasshopper's, which rasped his spine deliciously and sent running up to his brain waves of sound which concussing broke. A marvelous discovery indeed, that the human voice in certain atmospheric conditions, for one must be scientific, above all scientific, can quicken trees into life. Happily, Restia put her hand with a tremendous weight on his knee, so that he was weighted down, transfixed, or the excitement of the elm trees rising and falling with all their leaves alight, and the color thinning and thickening from blue to the green of a hollow wave, like plumes on a horse's heads, feathers on ladies. So proudly they rose and fell, so superbly, would have sent him mad. But he would not go mad. He would shut his eyes. he would see no more. Next, please.
Second, leaves were alive, trees were alive, and the leaves being connected by millions of fibers within his own body, there on the seat, fanned him down. When the branch stretched, he too made that statement. The sparrows fluttering, rising, and falling in jagged fountains were part of the pattern, the white and blue, barred with black branches. Sounds made harmonies with premeditation. The spaces between them were as significant as the sounds. A child cried. Rightly far away a horn sounded. All taken together meant the birth of a new religion. Septimus, said Risa. He started filing. People must know. I'm going to walk to the fountain and back, she said, for she could stand it no longer. Dr. Holmes might say there was nothing the matter. Far rather would she that he were dead. She could not sit beside him when he stared so, and did not see her, and made everything terrible, sky and tree, children playing, dragging carts, blowing whistles, falling down, all were terrible, and he would not kill himself, and she, no one. Septimus has been working too hard. That was all she could say to her own mother. To love makes one solitary, she thought. She could tell nobody, not even Septimus now, and looking back, she saw him sitting in his shabby overcoat alone, on the seat, hunched up, staring. And it was cowardly for a man to say he would kill himself. But Septimus had fought. He was brave. He was not Septimus now. She put on her lace collar. She put on her new hat, and he never noticed. And he was happy without her. Nothing could make her happy without him. Nothing. He was selfish, so men are. For he was not ill. Dr. Holmes said there was nothing the matter with him. She spread her hand before her. Look, her wedding ring slipped. She had grown so thin. It was she who suffered, but she had nobody to tell. Next, please.
Far was Italy and the white houses and the room where her sister sat making hats, and the streets crowded every evening with people walking, laughing out loud, not half alive like people here, huddled up in bath chairs, looking at a few ugly flowers stuck in pots. For you should see the Milan garden, she said aloud, but to whom? There was nobody. Her words faded. So a rocket fades, its sparks having grazed their way into the night, surrendered to it. Dark descends, pours over the outlines of houses and towers. Bleak hillsides soften and fall in. But though they are gone, the night is full of them. Robbed of colour, blank of window, they exist more ponderously, give out what the frank daylight fails to transmit. The trouble and suspense of thing conglomerated there in the darkness, huddled together in the darkness, reft of the relief which dawn brings them, washing the walls white and grey, spotting each window pane, lifting the mist from the fields, showing the red-brown cows peacefully grazing, all in once more decked out to the eye exists again. Orla?
Are you there, Orla?
I am alone. I am alone, she cried by the fountain in Regent's Park, staring at the Indian and his cross, as perhaps at midnight, when all boundaries are lost, the country reverts to its ancient shape, as the Romans saw it, lying cloudy when they landed, and the hills had no names, and rivers wound they knew not where. Such was her darkness. When suddenly, as if a shelf were shot forth and she stood in it, she said how she was his wife, married years ago in Milan, his wife, and would never, never tell that he was mad. Turning the shelf fell, down, down she dropped. For he was gone, she thought, gone as he threatened to kill himself, to throw himself under a cart. But no, there he was, still sitting alone on the seat in his shabby overcoat, his legs crossed, staring, talking aloud. Next, please.
Men must not cut down trees. There is a God. He noticed such revelations on the backs of envelopes. Change the world. No one kills from hatred. Make it known. He wrote it down. He waited. He listened. A sparrow perched on the railing opposite, chirped Septimus. Septimus, 4 or 5 times over, and went on, drawing in its notes out to sing freshly and piercingly, in Greek words, how there is no crime. And joined by another sparrow, they sang in voices prolonged and piercing in Greek words from trees in the meadow of life beyond the river, where the dead walk, how there is no death. There was his hand, there the dead. White things were assembling behind the railings opposite, but he dared not look. Evans was behind the railings. What are you saying? Said Raisa suddenly, sitting down by him. Interrupted again. She was always interrupting. Away from people, they must get away from people, he said, jumping up. Right away over there, where there were chairs beneath a tree, and the long slope of the park dipped like a length of green stuff, with ceiling cloth of blue and pink smoke high above. And there was a rampart of far irregular houses, hazed in smoke. The traffic hummed in a circle, and on the right, dun-coloured animals stretched long necks over the zoo palings, barking, howling. There they sat down under a tree. Look, she implored him, pointing at the little troop of boys, carrying cricket stumps, and one shuffled, spun round on his heel and shuffled, as if he were acting a clown at the music hall. Look, she implored him, for Dr. Holmes had told her to make him notice real things, go to a music hall, play cricket. That was the very game, Dr. Holmes said, a nice out-of-door game, the very game for her husband. Look, she repeated. Anna?
Look, the unseen bade him, the voice which now communicated with him, who was the greatest of mankind, Septimus, lately taken from life to death, the Lord, who had come to renew society, who lay like a coverlet, a snow blanket, smitten only by the sun, forever unwasted, suffering forever, the scapegoat, the eternal sufferer. But he did not want it. He moaned, putting from him with a wave of his hand that eternal suffering, that eternal loneliness. Look, she repeated, for he must not talk aloud to himself out of doors. Oh, look, she implored him. But what was there to look at? A few sheep, that was all. The way to Regent's Park tube station. Could they tell her the way to Regent's Park tube station? Mazzie Johnson wanted to know. She was only up from Edinburgh 2 days ago. Not this way, over there, Rita exclaimed, waving her aside lest she should see Septimus. Both seemed queer, Maisie Johnson thought. Everything seemed very queer. In London for the first time, come to take up a post at her uncle's in Leadenhall Street, and now walking through Regent's Park in the morning, this couple on the chairs gave her quite a turn. The young woman seeming foreign, the man looking queer, so that should she be very old, she would still remember and make it jangle again among her memories how she had walked through Regent's Park on a fine summer morning 50 years ago, for she was only 19 and had got her way at last to come to London. And now how queer it was, this couple she had asked the way of. And the girl started and jerked her hand, and the man, he seemed awfully odd, quarreling perhaps, parting forever perhaps. Something was up, she knew, and now all these people, for she returned to the broad walk, the stone basins, the prim flowers, the old men and women, invalids, most of them in bath chairs, all seemed, after Edinburgh, so queer. and Massey Johnson as she joined that gently trudging, vaguely gazing, breeze-kissed company, squirrels perching and preening, sparrow fountains fluttering for crumbs, dogs busy with the railings, busy with each other, while the soft, warm air washed over them and lent to the fixed, unsurprised gaze with which they received life something whimsical and mollified. Massey Johnson positively felt she must cry. Oh, for that young man on the seat had given her quite a turn. Something was up, she knew. Next.
Horror! Horror! She wanted to cry. She had left her people. They had warned her what would happen. Why hadn't she stayed at home? She cried, twisting the knob of the iron railing. That girl, thought Mrs. Dempster, who saved crusts for the squirrels and often ate her lunch in Regent's Park, don't know a thing yet. Really, it seemed to her better to be a little stout, a little slack, a little moderate in one's expectations. Percy drank. Well, better to have a son, thought Mrs. Dempster. She had had a hard time of it and couldn't help smiling at a girl like that. You'll get married, for you're pretty enough, thought Mrs. Dempster. Get married, she thought, and then you'll know. Oh, the cooks, and so on. Every man has his ways. But whether I'd have chosen quite like that if I could have known, thought Mrs. Dempster, I could not help wishing to whisper a word to Maisie Johnson, to feel on the creased porch of her worn old face the kiss of pity. For it's been a hard life, thought Mrs. Dempster. What hadn't she given to it? Roses, figure, her feet too. She drew the knobbed lumps beneath her skirt. Roses, she thought sardonically. All trash, my dear, for really, what with eating, drinking, and mating, the bad days and good, life had been no mere matter of roses. And what was more, let me tell you, Carrie Dempster had no wish to change her lot with any woman's in Kentish Town. But, she implored, pity. Pity for the loss of roses. Pity, she asked of Maisie Johnson, standing by the hyacinth beds. Joe.
But that aeroplane. Hadn't Mrs. Dempster always longed to see foreign parts? She had a nephew, a missionary. It soared and shot. She always went on the sea at Margate, not out of sight of land, but she had no patience with women who were afraid of water. Swept and fell. Her stomach was in her mouth. Up again. There's a fine young feller aboard of it, Mrs. Dempster wagered. And away it went, fast and fading. Away the aeroplane shot, soaring over Greenwich and all the masts, over the little island of great churches, St. Paul's and the rest, till on either side of London fields spread out and dark brown woods where adventurous thrushes, hopping boldly, glancing quickly, snatched the snail and tapped him on a stone once, twice, thrice. Away and away the aeroplane shot, till it was with nothing but a bright spark. An aspiration, concentration, a symbol, so it seemed to Mr. Bentley, vigorously rolling his strip of turf at Greenwich, of man's soul, of his determination, thought Mr. Bentley, sweeping round the cedar tree to get outside his body, beyond his house, by means of thought, Einstein, speculation, mathematics, the Mendelian theory. Away the aeroplane shot. Joan.
Then, while a seedy-looking nondescript man carrying a leather bag stood on the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral and hesitated, for within was what balm, how great a welcome, how many tombs of banners waving over them, tokens of victories, not over armies, but over, he thought, that plaguey spirit of truth, seeking which leaves me at present without a situation. And more than that, the cathedral offers company, he thought, invites you to membership of a society. Great men belong to it. Martyrs have died for it. Why not enter in, he thought. Put this leather bag stuffed with pamphlets before an altar. A cross, the symbol of something which has soared beyond seeking and questing and knocking of words together and has become all spirit, disembodied, ghostly. Why not enter in? He thought, and while he hesitated, out flew the airplane over Ludgate Circus. It was strange. It was still. Not a sign was to be heard above the traffic. Unguided, it seemed, sped of its own free will, and now curving up and up, straight up, like something mounting in ecstasy and pure bright, out from behind poured white smoke, looping, writing, a T, an O, an F.
Oh, goodness.
Next one. Yes.
No, we're done.
Right
We're
here.
done.
Oh,
We're done.
her writing is quite remarkable, is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
So many characters and time zones and the geography of, the sky and the benches and the grass and
Yeah.
traffic.
I think it shows her intense love of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And noticing everything
Mm-hmm.
around her and making up little stories about each one as she sees it.
Mm-hmm. It's like global in her head,
Yeah.
put on paper.
Mm-hmm. And the way she expresses herself and her metaphors, I think everything is just, to me, astounding writing.
Yeah. And then
Oh.
the personal, she's ill, right?
Who? Mrs. Dalloway?
Mhm.
No.
No.
No, I thought she had surgery.
She has been ill though, right?
Yeah.
I thought she had influenza.
Oh,
Anyway.
no. I don't know.
No?
I don't know.
And what is the daughter going with a woman?
Going to visit a woman.
I'm not sure. I think it's more than that.
Yeah. The description of that woman was really good, and the gabardine
Yeah.
and the way she said that she had absorbed a lot of stuff that probably wasn't really part of her character. If she could get rid of it,
Yeah.
She was being kind to her in a way, but she detested her, but she was trying to be kind.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked the line early on. She always had the feeling that it was very, very dangerous to live even one day. I thought it really, really good.
Does anybody else feel a relationship between this and The Wasteland?
Yeah, I'd imagine she was probably influenced
I think
by
so.
it.
I think she was floating in like she knew Eliot very well, and they printed the Hugger Press printed The Wasteland. So and Eliot read it out to herself and her husband as well. Some of it.
Was this before or after Mrs. Dalloway?
This was
It would have been
Mrs.
before.
Dalloway, yeah, before, yeah.
So that came out at the same as Joyce's time, 1922.
Yeah.
Okay, so like 3 years before.
Yeah.
She wrote Mrs. Dalloway. I mean, to me, the really astounding knock me down part happened where it seemed like everything was in this amorphous walking through mist until the shot in the street.
Yeah.
And suddenly all of the characters that were around had something to focus on.
Yeah.
Besides their own drifting through existence. I mean, this is how it came to me. It's kind of like, I thought this was brilliant. That she so simply has pointed out the role of celebrity and royalty in modern society.
Well, that was England.
Well, we do the same thing. We just do it with movie personalities and crazy stunts. But I thought that was that really went very deep. That sudden shift, to me, it's like we're just kind of drifting along. It's almost like we're, we're sea vegetables lolling and being moved one way or another by the currents. And all of a sudden there's this one event that grabs all attentions to itself.
Well, the airplane.
And the airplane, yeah.
And then the airplane, another stunt.
You know the way in Ulysses, they sort of cast aspersions on the Windsors, like they talk about, Joyce mentions not the Victoria thing and the farting, but further on about, like, I'm not good on who was king when.
Edward.
Was it Edward? But when they talk about, now in this book it's page 21, when someone insults, a colonial insult at the House of Windsor, and then they talk about weddings, and then it says, for the surface agitation of the passing cars, it sunk grazed something very profound.
Yeah.
And I think there are hints in this book that all is not as it appears to be. Because it's, it seemingly is saying all sorts of lovely things, but then it says that, and you're wondering, is there an edge?
Yeah, and if you look at the start of it, she gives you a symbolic message at the start. Well, first of all, you get this sentence, could be straight out of Joyce. Mrs. Dalloway said she'd buy the flowers herself. Is that first or second person? No, and it doesn't matter. For Lucy had to work her out for the doors.
Yeah.
That's an entrance. Taken off their hinges.
It says here that she was very influenced by Joyce.
Oh yeah, she was very like, where's the chapter headings? Where might that have come from? And guess what? There's 18 chapters.
Yeah, and I thought the first draft had 12 episodes or something in it.
But that sentence, the doors will be taken off their hinges. She's hinting that something is unhinged. And that's Septimus, of course, but it's also the society that you're picking up on, Orla. And this wonderful car misfires with the king or the queen or the prime minister in it, and the whole street goes into spasms of thought processes. That's all disappearing. The empire is over. And Rumpelmayer's men were coming. Rumpelmayer's were caterers in London. And the Hotel Saint Moritz in Paris. Like, these are very, but the idea unhinged equals insanity. That's real joy.
Becoming unhinged.
Yeah, pointing. Joyce points with words. And she's pointing that this entrance, an entrance is into somewhere where you're not. We're going in somewhere different, and it'll be unhinged.
Yes, she could quite easily be speaking about herself.
Yeah, Dalloway herself is nuts. She's unhinged. Yeah. and she's got, she's fantastic. It's like, this is straight out of Joyce. For they might be parted for hundreds of years, she and Peter. Never wrote a letter. His were dry sticks. Suddenly he would come over her. If he were with me now, like, who is talking here? It's her inner voice talking.
Yeah.
She's picked up his techniques.
Yeah. Stream of conscience.
Stream of consciousness, and you bet there'll be a stream of unconsciousness too somewhere later on. And all that is happening. I think it's fantastic. This is how an English person would write Ulysses. You know, and
I think,
the
I think that that Joyce gave credence to Dujardin for the stream of consciousness thing, and he was kind of borrowing from him. And although Joyce has influenced, obviously, Virginia Woolf, I think we should give her credence for her own writing and the way she has written these pages, these 2 chapters. They're fabulous, and to be able to write like that, and to be, while she's walking on the street, she's in the flower shop. She does a fantastic job with the 2 people sitting in the park and the young lady from Edinburgh coming up,
Yeah.
and how she evokes both the sorrow of their position and also the estrangement of the young girl when she suddenly finds herself in London. And she does this in a few sentences, after all the rest of the stuff. So I think
it is fantastic. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff. And it holds you in.
Yeah.
You don't have to work. It just keeps on in your back.
Can someone enlighten me?
It's lovely to read, actually, when you're listening and just reading along.
Yeah.
You actually see the whole thing coming alive. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love Septimus the trees,
Yeah.
Yeah. Lifting him and lowering him.
Yeah. One must not cut down trees.
No.
There's lovely, refined English. You could hear.
Yeah.
She doesn't like. She could even criticize her own appearance. Her stick figure where she should be.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. I'd love to know who that colonial is in Windsor. I bet you his son Paddy. Like, you don't open your squeaker in Windsor about the royal family. In all the pubs around there. If you've ever been to Windsor, you don't.
You mentioned chapters. Now, my book has not a single chapter marked.
No.
I have numbers, but I'm hearing that is not the original design, that the original design has no numbers.
Yeah.
Does it have page breaks?
We don't even have asterisks. Good old Joyce points us with the asterisks, but not this girl.
But and also just the very specific landmarks of the city. The Victoria up on her throne outside of Buckingham.
Yeah. I could see all those places from.
I could too.
Yeah.
I was literally walking them with her.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
And also the whole thing of Septimus's illness.
Yeah.
I mean, he survived the war. He meets the wife in Italy.
Yeah.
But he's shell-shocked.
Yeah. The doctor says absolutely nothing wrong with them. Give them to big
Yeah.
As much as the psychiatrist would have known at the time.
Yeah, which was exactly all they were told was put yourself together.
Yeah.
There's got to be some meaning to the name Septimus, though, I would think.
Yeah, could be.
It's not a normal name.
I think somebody said, was it? No, I can't think. I think it's something else. It's something to do with 7.
Yeah, it's the 7th. Septimus is 7th in Latin.
Yeah, and and there was something about Virginia Woolf being, I don't know what it was. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it rings a bell.
Yeah.
Have a look on Google.
But for all the precision of the descriptions, she flies from one through another. There seems to me to be quite a level of detachment or separateness from what she's describing.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, that's why I said it's like everybody's kind of floating
Yeah.
Yeah.
whichever way the wind is blowing at the
Mm.
particular time. That's why
Mm.
that sudden loud sound in the street
Yeah.
has such effect because
Mm.
everything's just been kind of yeah, and then
Mm.
suddenly and all attention goes to that. Who is it? Whoa, who's in there? What's
Yeah.
this? What's this
We
all
never
about?
find
Look, they pulled the curtains. It
we never find
suddenly
I see that entirely differently.
huh,
I,
okay.
I see it as a woman who is very acutely um, noticing everything about her,
yeah.
and she is delighting in life and the different things
Okay.
that she can see. She isn't going into any story about each. Well, she is a little bit in some of them, isn't she? Going making up stories about each one. But I think she's just very interested in life itself and the different ways people are experiencing it,
Mm.
um, and her own life too.
Mm.
I don't see it as floating by. I find everything making a very sharp impression on her mind, and
Yeah,
Okay, well, maybe
she's
being a little too brutal, but I mean, she really reminds me. This is it's entirely brutal. She reminds me of a consciousness like Donald Trump's, who who is who is constantly, he
Yeah.
can't keep his mind on
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
because everything is kind of equal, whatever, and so it easily jumps from
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
thing to another.
Yeah.
And yes, she does for the time that she observes something, it's fairly clear, but I mean she's just immediately pulled in a different
well,
direction.
she's walking along and she's noticing different things as she goes.
Okay. All right. Well, we shall see.
Yeah.
We shall see in future readings of this book
yeah.
if that's a characteristic that remains,
Yeah.
and then we'll have opportunities to
Yeah.
kind of.
Hey, you
Well,
you
yeah, it does seem
Dante.
as if,
Hey guys,
sorry.
Septimus stands for the seventh circle of Dante, according to Uncle Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over to you, Dante experts.
Yeah. No, I was just
Uh,
going to say there that it does seem that she is introduced, what, about 10 different characters,
Yeah.
Mm.
which
Yes.
seems to be the
Mhm.
purpose of this flashing through the whole thing. I presume these characters are going to be developed further later on.
Some will, yeah.
It's a very short synopsis of each one.
mm-hmm.
But it does give you that feeling of what London was like.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does. And the movement. Yeah. Yeah.
Edinburgh, and then that colonial in Windsor who starts to
Yeah.
fight, you know, and
Mm.
yeah,
And she quotes Shakespeare.
Mm.
Cymbeline, yeah.
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 Oh, yes. It says here Woolf's novel points toward universal meanings through the undramatic and externally insignificant events of 2 days.
Yeah.
2 days. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a
Ulysses in one day.
as opposed to Ulysses, this is a
Yeah.
2-day
I thought
event.
I thought it was just a 1 day event. She goes by Flowers and she has a party that night.
Well, I think it's the same as
With the Prime
Ulysses
Minister.
in
Yeah,
the
the Prime
sense.
Minister is coming. It probably goes over
Yeah.
past midnight, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the modern world, where the events that seem to matter most in everyone's life are inward and indivisible, Woolf reduced the physical quests in her books to a very few, almost trivial actions. All the tension and excitement went into the psychological quests.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ah.
All right. Well, I will tell you, I'm kind of glad that we went ahead and read as much as we did today. On the other hand, it left us very short of time.
Well,
So I think probably when we gather together next week, that we will read one of these things, which, at least in my version, it does have chapters, that we would just read one of those and then concentrate on that for a while before moving on.
Yeah, because the book is not very long. It's not that it's going to take us that much, so long to read it that way. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. How much of it did we read today?
2 chapters.
Well, I know, but I mean in terms of percentage.
Oh,
In my book, we did 30 pages out of about 200.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have 40 pages out of 260. So
Oh, okay. Okay.
sixth-
So
a sixth
we did
of the
about
book.
we did about a 20% today.
Mhm.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad we're doing this.
Mhm.
This is, pretty astounding.
oh,
I
she
will
is.
be thinking about this.
Larissa.
Larissa,
Exactly.
does that name have a meaning?
Yeah, the most bright female.
Ah,
Well, Clarissimus would be the most.
Oh, clear.
On a comparison, if I could say that for someone who hasn't read this before, the comparative of reading 20% of Ulysses straight off would be pretty heavy stuff.
All right. Well, I will officially call an end to our session today.
Great stuff.
I
Thank you very much, Don.
thank